Hi everybody and welcome to Tom and Joe's wire cutting clay workshop. This is an introductory session where we're going to show you an introduction to the material that we're going to be using over the next 6 weeks, but also the kit which we designed and prepared, which you should all have here. My name's Joe Hartley.
My name's Tom.
Tom's going to talk you through the kit a little bit, and then I'm going to do you a little bit of a talk through the material, clay.
Hi everyone. You should have got a kit which comprises of 2 discs, one disc with a slot down the middle, and another disc with just a hole in it, and a screw, and a piece of wire. Now, for this introductory session, you can kind of forget about these. The most important thing is the wire. So everything that we're going to make, we'll be using this wire. And of course, you can make your own kit. And all you need to make your own kit is basically a screw and a piece of wire. This is just kind of standard wire that I found, which I think is some sort of electrical wire. And I just stripped the plastic off and then uncoiled it, unwound it to get like a single wire out. And this wire is very good because it's got this amazing kink in it. And you'll see that when we come to make the products, why that's kind of good. So for these are both labeled, these discs. We're going to use one of these discs today. We've got disc A and disc B. Disc B is when we advance a little bit. We'll move on to that in the next few weeks or the next sessions. But for today, we're just going to use A. So we'll start off, we'll put that on your surface, overhanging a surface. Now, the surface underneath, it can be like a worktop. Don't use a table. Obviously, you're putting a screw into it, or a scrap piece of wood that you've clamped to a table, something like that. So the piece of wire has a small hole at one end and a larger hole at the other end. The small hole fits a screw through it so that the screw can't come off the head, like so. What we do is put that on the wire, position your disc kind of about 1/4 of a way sticking out over the edge of the table. Position your screw through it. It should just push through the disc and be located onto the table. And then with a screwdriver, use some downward pressure, hold the screw, turn the screwdriver, pressure down, a few turns, not much, until it's about 1 centimetre. The head of the screw is around about 1 centimetre raised up from the disc. Now, also in your kit, you should have a pencil. If you haven't got one, you need a pencil. The pencil goes in the other end like so. And the purpose of this is the wire. We're going to use the wire in a variety of applications to go around this disc, turning the disc, keeping the disc still, moving the wire up and down. So just practice that, go around. And that's basically your kit. Anything to add to the kit, Joe?
I think if you no, that sounds wonderful. I guess if you were going to make the kit at home, or you're watching this without one of our kits, you could use string. Do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I did try it with string. You can use string. Obviously, it pulls through the clay in a little bit of a different manner. Yeah. You can use fishing wire. You can tie knots into the fishing wire, and that will give you a texture. It'll bring that texture out. But we'll get on to all those things.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit through the clay that we're going to use. So I'm just going to, I know you've all just screwed in your wire to the table, but if you could just unscrew it for a second and get your wire, we're going to use the wire. So I've got a bag of clay down here, which is a 12.5 kilo bag of clay. I imagine quite a lot of you watching will have a similar size bag. Tom, you've got a slightly different style.
Yeah, I've got some scrag ends in the bottom of the bag.
And that's fine. You can use.
People may have been given clay by people, and but mine's kind of a bit of a messy lump.
Yeah, and the processes we're going to be showing you are robust enough to handle anything really. It doesn't. You could use any kind of clay. Hello, Hector. Oops. Come on. So usually when you get a brand new bag of clay, there's a wire at the top which you can twist off. Take that off and then just peel the plastic back. Sorry, Hector. You have to come back in a minute. Peel back the plastic like this to reveal the clay. Because we've got a wire to hand, this one, we can use this one to take some clay off. There's too much clay there to use in one go. So you can tear the clay off, but it's quite good just to slice a chunk off like that. And actually, when you do that, hold the wire with both hands and pull it across the clay. It's the first thing you're going to do to the clay. And then if you peel it away, you'll actually see for the first time a pattern emerge from the wire being simply pulled through the clay. So even in removing some clay from the bag, we've started to influence it and we've created pattern in it. And it's this pattern which emerges when you pull wire through clay that we're going to explore through this program and in different ways. So this is the clay we're going to use. I'm going to wrap this back up. I'm going to twist the bag, make sure it's airtight because clay will dry out. And then with the wire that I took off, I'm going to wire it back up again. So your clay should be what we call plastic state. And plastic state is probably, if anybody's worked in clay before, it's probably the most familiar state of clay. It's like plasticine, really. Sometimes it can be wetter and sometimes it can be drier. And that's good. This process is robust enough to handle wetter clays and drier clays. If your clay feels like it might be too wet as you're doing this, if you leave it out on the side, maybe for half a day, it'll dry out a little bit more, then you can use it after that. Also, on the other end of the scale, if it feels like it's a little bit dry and you can't work it properly, it won't do what you want it to do. Tom, I liked your process where you say you dunk the whole thing in water quickly, which coats it, and then put it in a bag, and all that water will slowly soak into it. So that's quite a good way of rehydrating it. This clay here.
My clay's slightly drier than yours, Joe, because it's been hanging around a bit.
That makes sense.
If you don't have a wire or you're using your wire, you can actually, there's nothing wrong with actually just pulling the clay off with your hand.
Yeah.
It's less neat, but you can do it. So we're going to start with how big a lump, Joe, just for this test, because we're just going to do a few tests today to show you what happens with the wire.
A Coke can is probably quite good. Let's go Coke can. So this bit I've got's too big. I'm going to tear it in half, like you suggested, Tom.
Yeah, so I've just pulled off a random lump like that. You don't need to worry too much about weights or size of things at the moment. We're just going to show you what happens with the wire. So just a lump of clay, kind of big enough to go in your hand comfortably. What are you doing there, Joe?
So I'm patting the clay and I'm patting it into a more uniform shape. So what I'm aiming for is around a Coke can type form. Okay, so a cylinder with two flat faces.
Yeah, you can also roll, just keep squeezing and rolling. So I'm just squeezing and then rolling it. Squeeze and roll. Keep going like that.
You can roll it on your deck as well, like that.
So you roll it to get the cylindricalness.
What you'll see, actually, it's interesting, if you roll it on wood, you can see the moisture coming out of the clay onto the wood. So all the time you're working clay with your hands on wood, what's happening is the moisture's being drawn out. So clay is drying out as we speak in front of you.
Yeah. So I'm just rolling it and then turning it that way. I'm just tapping it to give you a flat top and a flat bottom, like so. And that's done. You can also leave it on the floor like that and keep revolving it. Okay.
Okay, so Coke can, cylinder.
Mine's more of a kind of jam jar, but that's fine.
Oh, just cylinder, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, put your kit back together again, put your screw through the hole, the small hole, screw it back in. This is if you took it apart.
Yeah, so I've set my kit out. I've got my clay here, and my dominant hand, my right hand, I'm putting the pencil down with the wire on the right hand side and just leave it there. And I'm going to pick the clay up, and I'm going to look over my cylinder, the disc, sorry, and I'm going to place this down so it's kind of central throughout the whole thing. And I'm just going to put it on. Measure a lot of things with our eyes. It's a good way of doing things, I find. Joe, you've got a different technique.
Yeah, if you want, it was just that you could, if you wanted to, with your screwdriver or your pencil, you could mark with your eye again, using your eye. There's no need to measure it, as central as you can, a dot on the bottom of it, and then that just helps you. So rather than looking over, you can line that dot up with your screw underneath like that. It's just another way, whichever works. You might have another way.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've got that there. It's kind of, I can move the disc around and the clay moves with it.
It's quite nice. I enjoy the once you put the clay on, Tom, the feel of the weight on it gives it a tactility, doesn't it? I like it.
Yeah, it's kind of stable now. So what I'm going to do first is kind of pull this tight, not too tight. Let's just kind of slightly tight. And then just going to lift. I'll bring it in a bit so you can see. I'm just going to lift it up around about 1 centimetre again. So the wire has gone up inside. Always got to think about what's going on inside here. The wire has gone up to the horizontal level of the screw head. You got yours to there, Joe?
Yeah, I've got mine to there. And I'm holding it. The wire is horizontal, so it's coming from the top of the screw. I guess that's quite important, is that you check before you dump your clay on top that the wire is existing at the top of the screw.
Yeah.
Okay. And
so for this one, perhaps Joe, if you go around with your hand and the wire, and I'll keep my hand still and move the disc, because there's various ways of.
I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to move around it.
Okay.
Like this.
And what I'm going to do is I'm holding the wire still, and I'm just revolving the bottom disc. Clay stays stuck to the disc, and it all moves around.
Is that
you come back to the same point. It's quite important when you come back to hit the exact point that the wire went up to when you got to that level at the top of the screw, and you get it into there. And when you're there, you can let it come down, and then you should be ready to pull off. If you kind of don't pull straight up, just kind of go to the side like so, and you'll get.
Lovely.
Okay.
Tom, that's like a nice model for relativity, isn't it? The notion of like traveling around with the wire or keeping the wire still and moving the thing.
Yeah.
So then we can take this bottom one off as well, can't we, Tom?
Yeah, this is kind of the basis of the next products we're going to be working on. Some tiles and some soap dishes. We can join these back together in that gap, but we'll come on to that when we come to the next processes with some slip. But for now, we're just going to leave it like that. So you set that one aside. And the next kind of practice one, what you can do now.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
Sorry, Joe.
Sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, of course, so this first one obviously has no texture on the bottom. It only has it on the one that we've cut it. But if we do another one now, the interesting thing is that you end up with texture on both faces. So as you work your way through your cylinder, you end up with texture on both faces from now on.
Yeah. So now we're gonna go back on the wire, but what I'm going to do is just clean the wire just from my fingers, pull all the clay that was on it off. When the wire's clean, it goes through the clay better. And then I'm going to use the hole, as long as it's in the center, that hole, we'll just locate that back on the screw and bob it down. And then wire out. So now for this one, I might try just moving the wire up and down as I go round as well. So I'm going to go up and down. Don't need to think about much, just go up and down. And back to the start again, and then down. And give it a wiggle. Sometimes it doesn't want to come off, so you can just, as long as you don't touch the surface that's got the patterns on, you can just touch the edge and it will come off like so. These aren't actual things, these are just tests you're doing. Well, that's very nice, Joe.
Thanks, Tom. I find that when you go round, so there's a question of like pressure, I guess, and how much you want to push down on top of the cylinder to keep it still. Because actually, if you don't touch the cylinder, it can, when you go round, it can move. So you do want to push down a little bit. But if you push down too hard, what can happen is, as you cut the clay, it can refuse it back together. So I think that the idea of this is just to kind of try it and just try and sense that pressure, really. You're just going to press just a little bit, isn't it, Tom? Just a little bit.
I will try. Yeah. So clean the wire off again. Pop it back on. Now for this one, I'm going to do it a bit wilder. And this is just kind of shaking the wire. So like Joe says, I'm applying very, very little pressure to the top. I'm just kind of keeping it stable. Back to that point again and down. And then manipulate it off like so. You can I wouldn't touch the surface because we're going to see all these surfaces. It's good not to touch that, but you can kind of let the clay rest underneath and use the sides to place it back together again, like that. This is kind of the basis of a soap dish we've been working on and just some normal dishes, and we'll come on to those in the following sessions.
So something else you can do as well is obviously explore the texture, but you can explore, obviously we're doing things which are quite flat here, but you can explore a more conical shape. So obviously you can do that by when you rise the wire, instead of just coming to about a centimetre, if you go beyond that and rise so that the wire is noticeably at a gradient, at an angle, then if you go around, this should offer you a more conical shape, which then in turn invites all manner of new exciting things you can make, because you've basically made a vessel. So then you can start playing around with the vessel that you can make, but then also the texture. And all of a sudden you've got something you could put. We always say dip, don't we, Tom?
Yes. Yeah, so the kind of cylindrical, but we're also going to be using like the bit we've taken off. We're going to be making some products with this section as well.
The cone.
Yeah. So just have a practice and don't be scared about wasting the clay.
Do you ever?
And that's basically.
you know, in between each one, maybe like a little bit of a, you know, just sort of showing your cylinder a little bit of care is quite good, isn't it, as well? Just maybe re-centering it, give it a roll.
Yeah.
If you need to, if you want to.
Yeah. But at this stage, don't be too precious. It's just a case of getting an idea. What I want you to do next is take these things and squash them all together.
What?
Is there a technique in pottery world for squashing things back together, Joe?
So yeah, you would the term you would wedge it back together. So what wedging is more of a systematic kind of kneading, which we won't go into because you don't really need to. But yeah, you would call it wedging, I guess. But yeah, just forcing the clay back together. And if you wedged it, you could, in theory, remove all of the air bubbles that are in there now. But it doesn't matter that there are air bubbles in there. If you push it together enough, it's fine.
Sometimes when I'm doing it,
and
because you've seen it when it goes onto the wood, you see the moisture that comes out. So when I've been using, sometimes I just dip it in some water, like so. That just adds a bit more moisture in it, and then you just carry on. It's good to do that because it'll give you a feel for the clay and how it reacts, because it's very wet now, but you carry on doing that and it'll become less wet because the water will just soak into the clay.
There is a good thing to know is that there aren't too many times you can recycle clay. Recycling clay, it doesn't do anything to the clay particles themselves. You can recycle it infinity times, so don't worry about it running out of.
Okay. So yeah, I'd encourage people just to practice that for a bit. And should we show people some of the products we've been working on, Joe?
I think so, that'd be good, wouldn't it? Yeah.
So this came about through a project you were working on, Joe, where you were designing some tiles.
Yeah, so it came off the back of a sort of live thing, a live chance to be able to make something in clay in Castlefield Gallery in Manchester. So it had to be something that somebody could make that was fairly standardised because we were putting them on the wall. So it came from this cutting with a wire. But we kind of like, so it was a tile, but we never fired it and we never installed them. But we've taken it and we pushed it further, haven't we, Tom?
Yeah, so we did a variety of things. I mean, through this course, we're going to be working on, we're going to move on from the things you've been doing today to making actual dishes, like soap dishes. And the hole in the bottom kind of works with us because that's where the water from the soap drains out under the bottom. So these are kind of perfect for the side of the bath, side of the sink, etc.
Of course,
we do some tiles, just some flat tiles. These are some Joe made that weirdly ended up in my house. The holes in these are quite big, but we're going to make them with smaller holes, so you can literally just screw the tiles onto a wall.
We're going to show you how to do a reflective book matching, it would be called in woodwork. But these are some angel wings that were Christmas decoration, but they don't have to be Christmas. We're going to show you how to do the reflective pattern like that.
Yeah. Christmas happened recently, so we developed a few things for Christmas. So there's like Christmas trees that we made. Here's some Christmas trees, all through the same, all with just a wire. Christmas trees, and we're not going to be this isn't glazed. This is just sprayed gold once it's been fired. And again, another glazed one. So Christmas trees to hang on your tree. It has a hole that goes up through the middle.
Doorknobs, which you just screw on. You screw these directly in, and the screw head is just on show.
These are some doorknobs, like angular ones. Or they can also be kind of light pulls. Here's a light pull.
Larger dishes, which you can stack on one or the other if you want, or just have them on their own. That was like, so obviously we went from a cylinder today. That's from a triangle shape. And do you see how I just plugged the hole? So you can plug the hole to make it so you can put food in it.
We've got fast stars, like throwing stars, decorations. These are really quick to do, quite good fun, quite fragile as well. What else have we got? And these are all like progression things. You start off with a tile and you just keep applying little changes and little changes. And then you come up with things like making a flower. And we can make a flower. We could do this maybe in one of the, like, we're going to do like a bit of an advanced further session at the end. We went with lots of little, there's a bigger flower. These also work. You can actually put things in these. God knows what. We also, at the beginning, we might not get around to doing this, but we've also, these are some actual bowls. This involves adapting the kit slightly, but not much.
They were some of the earliest things we did, weren't they, Tom? Those.
Yeah, when Joe and I first started developing things, this is what we came up with when we were at Grizedale Arts, deciding what to do. I quite like this. It's kind of a cup. So that's maybe just a wire, nothing else.
What I really like, Tom, about all these processes, they're essentially the same as when you open a bag of clay and cut a piece off. They're essentially like, they're just like it's basically that, isn't it? Cutting off a piece of clay from a piece of clay.
Yeah. So it's kind of trying to think in a less traditional pottery sense, and trying to think in ways that are simple that anyone can do. It's kind of quite effective as well. So hopefully you'll join us for the rest of the sessions. The next session, we're going to do tiles, like we said. So all you're going to need for that is the basic kit, some clay, and that's it. For this set of sessions, we're going to be doing some tutorials. So you'll get this video, be able to watch it, and then a few days later, before the next video becomes available, we're going to hold some group tutorials. So we can all get together. You can ask us questions, and we can develop things, and hopefully we'll all come up with some ideas for some other products.
That'd be cool.
Cool. Right, that's it.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Goodbye.
very much for joining, everybody. See you soon.